Hello and welcome to the Adalo training video. We'll go through creating a very basic app. And for this example, we're going to start with a desktop web app. So I'm going to select that here as my first choice. Then go next, where you can choose from available templates. We're going to go with a blank template. And then finally, to get your app started, you set your branding. So we're going to name this app Wander. It's going to be a very basic trip planning app. If you're part of multiple teams, you can pick which team, but for most cases, you won't have to choose that. And then you can set your brand's primary and secondary colors. So we'll make this just a little bit more blue, and then go ahead and to create an app. So now, just to get you oriented, here we are inside of Wander, and you've got this canvas here where we've got 4 screens that the app is started out with by default, and then we've got a couple toolbars along the left side along the top. So we'll just go through these basic options so you understand how the application is laid out, and then we'll start building out this Wander app. So first, front and center is the name of the app with a drop-down arrow. This is your app switcher. So if you've got multiple apps, you can see other ones. You can see I've got a bunch. And at the bottom of this is create new app, and that's how you can create other apps. Next is a preview button. If you click this, it will actually open up a new tab and run your app right here in the browser, so you can test it out as you're building. And we've also got a share link. This is a way for you to share the app with people who don't have an Adalo account that you want to get feedback from. And then over here is your account menu, so you can get to settings, help and documentation, and sign out. So under settings, you've got your profile where you can edit your email and password. Team and billing is where you can manage your team members, as well as your plan and your billing information. And then finally here is domains, where you can set up custom domains. So you can do that by entering the domain that you would want, such as app.example.com. Again, this is just if you don't want to use the adalo.com as the domain for your app. And so you can click add here, and then you get information about how to set up your DNS records so that you can use this custom domain. So those are all the options up top. And then along the left, we've got this plus button. If you click this gives you the ability to add either components or screens. So in the components tab, you can see we've got a search here. So if you know you want a button, you can just start typing and get those results. We've also got things categorized. So by default, you'll see most used categories open. We've got text, buttons, some lists, forms. But there's also other categories as well. So you've got navigation, lists, which is almost always where you're going to start when you're building an app. And then buttons, simple. So these are more basic elements like shapes and text that you can use to build your own aesthetic from scratch. And then we've got forms and fields. So you can have a whole form. If you need individual fields, you can build those out here. We also have chart options, and then some Stripe payment components as well. And then also in this plus menu is not just the ability to add components, but also the ability to add screens. So we have blank screens that you can add, but we also have various templated screens, so you don't have to start from scratch if you don't want to. And again, we've got different categories for those, for everything from simple to info, where you can get more detailed views of if you're viewing a particular record, intro, so things like sign-up screens, various types of list screens that are all pre-built for you, and then some miscellaneous ones like left nav and modals and chat screens. So that's everything that's available in the plus menu. If we go to the next option here, which is our branding tab, here's where you can customize the colors for your app. So you can see the same 2 options that you got when you started your app, and you can customize these at any time. So if I want to go back to a green color, I can do that, and you can see all my screens updated automatically. We'll set it back to blue. And then you can also update your secondary color, your default screen background color, as well as your default text color. Next up is the Screens tab. So this lets you view the list of all of your screens, and you can click the arrow next to them to see a list of the elements within the screens, and you can see groups that are nested within there as well. And then from there, you can click on any of them to edit that element that you just selected. Obviously, when you've just got 4 screens here, it's pretty easy to navigate, but as your app gets bigger, this can be a quick way to jump to what you're trying to find. You can also click on the name of the screen itself here to see information about that screen. Next, we've got the database. So here's where you can see your database collections. Every app starts off with a collection of users, but you can click in here and see the properties on the users table. So it starts off with email, password, username, and full name. And you can click to add various types of properties, and you can see the different kinds of properties here. So for example, if I wanted to, in my trip planning app, have a trips as a collection, I can click add collection, and we're going to call this collection trips. And as a note here, it's always best to use the plural name when naming your collection, and then Adalo will automatically either use the single or plural of that depending on your context. So we'll name this trips, and then it's got a name property by default. I'm going to add a couple more properties here. So I'm going to add another text property, and we're going to call this description, and save that. And then we'll do one for an image, because we're going to do an image with each trip, and we'll call this image. And then we're going to add one more property, which is a relationship. And this is going to be a relationship to our users table. When I do this, then I get this modal here that asks how are users and trips related. And so I have three options whenever I do this. And you can see we kind of visually depict the way that this relationship might work. So the first option is a user can have multiple trips, and a trip belongs to one user, which is what I want in this case. I'm going to go ahead and select that. The other options would be a user can only have one trip, but a trip can have multiple users. And the last option is a many-to-many relationship, where a trip can have multiple users and users can have multiple trips. This last option is most commonly used for things like tags. So if you're going to have trips that have different tags like adventure or relaxation, you could see how those tags could belong to multiple trips, as well as trips could have multiple of those tags. Another common use case for this many-to-many relationship is for like users and events. So again, that's another example where events can have multiple users and users can attend multiple events. But again, for trips, we just want to say that a user can have multiple trips, but the trip's only going to belong to just the one user. So click done, and that's going to add that property here as well. So that is how the database tab works. Next, in our toolbar, we've got our settings tab. Here you can change the name of the app. You can also upload an app icon. If you're using Google Analytics with your app, you can submit your Google Analytics here. If you're a member of multiple teams, you can adjust which team the app belongs to. And you can also add team members to give them specific app access. And then your last two options in the settings are the ability to copy the app. So if you want to have this as a starting point for another app, you can do that. And finally, the option to delete the app if you decided you just need to totally start over. Okay, that brings us to our last option in the toolbar, which is the publish option. And here you'll see two options, one for publish to app stores, which is a process that we help you with along the way to make sure that everything gets set up with your Apple and Google developer accounts, as well as submitting the app itself. But for this example, we'll focus on publishing to the web. So if you click this here, if you've got multiple domains, you can pick them from the dropdown. So you can do that. And remember, I mentioned over here in your settings is where you can add other custom domains if you want to use a custom domain. And also you can customize the path. So what comes after the slash in the URL. And then if you made any changes, you can save it. And then you can also copy the URL here. So there we go. That's kind of a walkthrough of everything in the top bar as well as the left toolbar. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's go ahead and build out this very basic app. So one of the things that I had mentioned before is that we've got these really helpful screen templates. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to delete this default home screen, and I'm going to instead have this login button. I'm going to have the submit button linked to a new screen. We're going to call this trips. and I'm going to go to my list category because I want to have a list of trips that my users can see. And so I'm just going to pick a simple list here and do, actually, you know what, I'm going to do an image list. I'm going to do create screen. And so now the login form is linking to this new trip screen. And I'm also going to make sure that the sign up is linking to that as well. And so we will go ahead and remove the old link and add a new link here to the trip screen. The other thing I need to do with the trip screen is I want to make sure that it's my new home screen. So if I click on the name of the screen here, you can see the properties for the screen itself. So we've got the name, the navigation type. So this is where you have three options. Is this the home screen? So that's the first screen if a user is logged in. A welcome screen, which is the first screen there to see if the user is not logged in, or just a normal screen. So we want to set this to be our home screen. So logged in users start here. And so then it's got the little home screen icon. You can see here on the welcome screen that is set up for the navigation type to be welcome so that people aren't logged in start right here. Okay, so now that I've got this new trip screen as my home screen, I can start doing some customization. So I want to change this title. Instead of just saying title, we're going to change this to say trips. And now I want to start, I'm going to get rid of this list title, and then I'm going to start configuring this image list. So when I've selected this list component in the left panel here, I can customize all the options for the list component. So this first says, what is this a list of? And I can pick any of the collections in my database. So it could be a list of users or a list of trips, or I can add a new collection right from the design area. But I want this to be a list of trips, so I'm going to select that. And now I can set up the rest of the properties of the list. So the next question is all about filtering. So what trips should this show? So first I can choose if this should be all trips or just the trips that belong to the logged in user, which is what I want here. And I can also add other filters if I want to filter by any of the properties on the trips. If I had added a status property to the trips collection, I could filter out so that it didn't include trips that had a draft status, for example. I can also add sorting. So I'm going to sort this to be by created date, newest to oldest. I can set a max number of items in my list if I want. If I had multiple image fields on my trips collection, I could pick which image is being shown here, but there's just one, so we pick that by default. I can also set a placeholder image if I know I'm going to have some trips that have images and some that don't. In this case, they all will, so I don't need to worry about that. I can customize the number of columns in the list, and then I can also say what happens when I click on a list item, and we'll come back to that in just a minute. So now that I've done the basics of the list itself, I can also customize the two other parts of the component, which are this title section here and this icon here. So for the title, we default it to be the trip name, but I'm going to remove that so you can see how this works. So I can have any text here be text that I type in. You can see it's showing up. And I can also have there be text from the database itself. So if I click this magic text icon, I can have this be the current trip name. I can do any combination as well. So I could be the current trip name as well as the created date. And with date fields, you can also click on this right here to customize the format of the date, whether or not you want it to be relative or just the date or the date and the time or the day of the week. We've got all those options here for you. But in this case, what I'm actually going to do is just have it be what we had put in default, was the trip name. Now, finally, I can customize this icon here. So I can change the icon if I want it to be something different. I can change its position as well as its color and what would happen if I press on it. But for this example, I actually don't want the icon at all. So I'm going to click this switch to just turn it off. Okay, so now I've got this list of trips. And what I need to do is have a way for users to create new trips. So I'm going to select this action button down here. And again, I can customize it by changing the icon, although the plus is definitely what we want here. I can change its colors. And now I need to add an action. So what happens when the user clicks this plus button? So when I click add action, I can pick from different types of actions for the application. So the first is links. So this can link to any of the other screens in my app. The other thing that I can have it do is have this button automatically create or update or delete records in my database. Or if it was more about authentication, I can have it log in or log out. For mobile apps, I can prompt a sharing prompt or trigger push notifications. Most of the time, though, you're either going to be linking or creating or updating or deleting. In this case, we want to link to a screen, but it's a screen we haven't designed yet, so it's going to be a new screen. So I'll click this, and we want this new screen to be called New Trip. And then I'm going to pick a template here, which is the form template. So I'll create that. So now this plus button is linking over to this new trip screen. And I'm going to click in and customize the title of the screen to be new trip. And then I'm going to click into this element here, which you can see is a group. So it's just a shape for the basic card background. So it's a white rectangle with some shadow. And then there's also a form that's part of this group. So I'm going to click it, double click in again. So I've got the form selected. And with the form, it starts by asking to pick which collection this form is for. So this is going to be for trips. And then you can choose if you want this to create a new trip or edit a specific trip that you had already selected. But we want this to create a new trip. And then I can customize the fields in the form. So you can see here that it automatically sets all the trip properties as something that the user can enter onto the form. So the name, description, and image. And you can customize these. So if you expand, you can change the label and placeholder text, or whether it's a single or multi-line input. You can also resort these if you wanted to change the order, or just remove them if you don't want to ask these on this particular form. And then we've also got fields that you can set automatically. So there might be things when this trip gets created that you want to set in the database that you don't want your user to have to enter. So for example, on trips, we have a property for which user created the trip. And we want that to automatically set to be the logged in user without the user having to manually put in their email address on this form. So that's how set automatically works. And then I can edit the styles of the fields themselves. So I can change the font size, the colors, I can change the rounding of the fields. So I've got all these options to customize the look and feel of the fields in my form. And then finally, we've got the submit button. So I can customize the text for create trip. And then I can customize the actions as well. So this is going to create the trip and then link back, but I could have other actions if I want this form to do even more things. And just like with the fields, I can edit the styles of the button as well. So I can make it more round or change its color and font size and all of that fun stuff. So the last thing I need to do with this is you can see the form when I made it edit the trip, the form got longer. So it kind of grew past this rectangle that's the background card for it. So I'm going to select that rectangle by double clicking on it and then just drag to make it a little bigger so it totally contains the form. Okay, so there we go. Now we've got our list of trips and the ability to create a new trip. And now there's one more thing that I'm going to add here, which is what happens when users click on a particular trip in this list. So I'm going to select this list again. And then right here is the ability for me to add actions to the list items. So I'm going to add an action. And again, this is going to be a link to a new screen. And so this is going to be the trip detail screen. And now I'm going to pick a screen template from the info category. And we're going to go with this template. So now we do create screen. And now whenever a user clicks on one of the strips in the list, it's going to take them to the trip details screen. And so now I'm going to customize the elements here, starting with the app bar. And if I click to customize the title, and we'll remove the default text. And if I click this magic text icon, then I can pick the information about the current trip. So that's the one that I just clicked on from the list, and then choose the current trip's name. And so now the trip name shows up in the app bar. And I can do a similar thing with the rest of the elements here. So for this image, I'm going to have this be an image from the current trip. And then for this text, I'll remove this default text and have this be the current trip description. And then for this label text here, I'm just going to change it from generically saying label to saying description. And then we don't really need a button on this screen, so I'm going to remove that. Okay, so now we've got a very basic trip planning app where users can make a list of trips and view all the information about them. So what I'm going to do now is click preview, and I can actually run the app here in my browser and make sure everything's working right. So if I click on sign up, it'll take me to the sign up page. I can enter my email, create a password, enter my name, and click sign up. And then this is taking me to my trip screen. I don't have anything here yet, so I need to create a new trip. So I'm going to click this plus button. And now I can give my trip a name. So this is going to be a trip to Hawaii, fill out a description, upload an image. So this is probably not showing up in the video, but this is open the file picker on my computer. And I'm going to pick an image that I've got of Hawaii here on my desktop. And now I can do create trip. And now we've got my first trip here, Hawaii, is showing up in my list. And if I click on it, it will take me to this details page where you can see Hawaii is showing up in the title. I've got my image and my description here. And then from here, I can click to go back to the home screen. So that's kind of the basics of building a simple app. I'll also point out here that in the database section, now you can see that for both users and trips, they each have one record now. And I can click to view those. If I click on record, it will show me a spreadsheet view of all the trips that I have in my database. So I've got Hawaii here. You can see all the details. And I can even click to edit that if I need to change it from here. I can also delete this record using this trash can icon. Also from here, if I wanted to manually create a trip directly into the database, I can click Add Trip to do that. I can also import data using this import option. It will let me add a CSV file, where then I can match up the columns in the CSV file to the properties in my trips collection. And then finally, there's a search as well. So if you've got lots of records, you can use the search to find the one that you're looking for. Other options in this database menu are I can edit the name of the collection if I need to change that. I can delete the collection if I want to get rid of it entirely. And then View Edit Records also opens up this database view. Okay, so that's it. That's a very basic overview of Adalo.